Hello everyone, welcome to the chapter 10 video. This chapter is all about getting instrument weather. In particular, it deals a lot with using charts. And Rod starts out this chapter with a little bit of review of your plain old telephone weather briefing. I don't know how many of you have ever actually gotten one of these things. They're not as common as they used to be. Used to be a lot of people would call 1-800-WX-BRIEF and get a briefing. Real quick reminder, he talks about the three different kinds of briefings. You have a standard brief, an abbreviated brief. So an abbreviated brief is basically something that you get if maybe you had a previous briefing or you just need a little bit of information. And then we have Outlook briefings, which are briefings for things that are more than 6 hours out. And he drills down a little bit from there and even gives you a nice example of how you should talk to ATC or the flight service station when you ask for the standard weather briefing. And that's the information that's presented basically in the same order as what you would present your information to file a flight plan, which is not surprising. So what are those items? Real quickly, if you look at a standard weather briefing, it starts with adverse conditions. So an adverse condition is just a condition that you might say, hey, whoa, we're done here. I don't need to take this flight. Then there's a synopsis. What is the general weather pattern covering the area of your flight? Current conditions, both at your departure point and your destination and en route. The en route forecast for the time that you say you're going to be in the air. What do they expect the weather to be en route? Your destination forecast. Winds aloft. Depending on your altitude that you said you were going to fly, they may interpolate for you if they have to, because remember that winds aloft are only forecast for every 3,000 feet, or they might make you do the math yourself. It really depends on the day. And then we have NOTAMs, any notices to airmen that might be relevant. And then finally, ATC delays. Now, ATC delays aren't going to be terribly common unless you're going into a big airport. So that is a standard weather briefing. Now, today, a lot of us, we're not going to do that. We're going to get our tablets, and we're probably going to use an app on our tablet, possibly even while we're in flight. And some of those same apps, those electronic flight bags like ForeFlight or WingX, etc., will actually do things for us like get the weather and even file our flight plan. In some cases, even open a flight plan for us, if we're going VFR, that is. So, a lot of cool things that you can do with technology today. He talks about things like uplink weather, where you can get weather in the cockpit using satellites. Much more common, I would say, today is if you have an aircraft that's equipped with ADS-B in, or if it's not, if you have a Stratus or a Stratux. If you're not familiar with the Stratux, it is basically a Stratus, but it's open source, so it's way cheaper. You can build your own, or you can buy one pre-made for less than $200. And it's in one unit going to have a dual band ADS-B in receiver. It's going to have a GPS and probably will also have an AHRS unit, which will give you backup attitude information. So if your gyros were to fail, you could use your tablet with the appropriate software as a backup. So pretty cool unit for $200 or less. Now, Rod does mention some things that some of them are actually not even available anymore. Even though this book is not terribly old, there's still some things that have become unavailable, such as HIWAS. HIWAS is gone. We do have things like Flight Watch still, where you can call up the flight service station and get some information. And of course, they will give you things like pilot reports as well. Incidentally, if you're getting weather from ADS-B in. That's called FISB, Flight Information Service -B, because it goes along with ADS-B. And then he gets a little bit into various charts and products. Right? So I've brought up here aviationweather.gov, which is kind of my go-to place. And this is the home page. And from here, you can look at observations, and you can also look at forecasts. And there's other stuff that you can use as well. So I want to start with a little bit of a review of METARs, meteorological observations. So if I go here, I have my graphical METARs. And of course, if I zoom in, I'm going to get a little bit more detail. Because if I'm zoomed out, it looks like there's absolutely nothing in all of Pennsylvania. Okay, so how do you read these? Again, this is review from back in private pilot days when you were going through your first ground school. And there's even a key here. It'll tell you, hey, here's what the wind is. So if I look over here at AVP, the wind is blowing this direction. So it looks like it's blowing out of the southeast at about 20 knots. And it will tell me the temperature, and it will tell me visibility. So visibility is pretty good here. And, what's the altimeter setting, any ceilings, and things like that. So it's a nice tool. If I click on this, it'll pop up the normal METAR. What do I mean by that? It'll pop up the text METAR. So something that's kind of cool that you can do, if you look down here, it says, I want to see some METARs, and I can enter their identifiers. Don't forget the K. If you don't put in the K, you won't get anything. I can also ask for raw or decoded, and I can also click this box that says, please include a TAF, which I usually do. A little bit about the decoded METARs. The decoded METARs do not provide you all of the information. Things like the remarks are omitted, and sometimes other information is omitted if it's not something that you always see. So another reason to use the raw ones, not just because you want to impress your friends with your awesome knowledge of all things aeronautical. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and say, get some METAR data. In here, I have some METARs from a few places around. The first one I have here is Philadelphia. And remember how this works. It's going to start with a station identifier. Now, Rod has this interesting little saying, should Tina walk Vera's rabbit without checking the dog's appetite? If that works for you, go for it. Seems a bit silly to me, but let's be honest. If you look at, say, the King schools and their ground schools, they have a lot of really corny things, but they help you remember. So maybe it's not so bad that that's extremely corny. All right, so Philadelphia on the 19th at 17:54 Zulu, here's what they saw. The winds were out of 90 degrees at 24 knots, gusting to 32. The visibility was 10 statute miles. There's a few clouds at 21,000 feet and a broken ceiling at 28,000 feet. Temperature was 19 Celsius, and the dew point was 00. So that temperature dew point is huge. The spread is, at least, between them. And surprise, surprise, there's no low clouds here. Altimeter setting, 30.25 inches of mercury. And then remarks, A02 tells me that I have things like precipitation discrimination on the system. What does that mean? That means that they can tell if it's raining or snowing or sleeting. Their system can tell that. Also here in the remarks, peak wind, PKWND. And a peak wind of 33 knots out of 100 was observed at 1701 Zulu. Sea level pressure in millibars ends in 242. And then here I have the actual temperature, not rounded to the nearest degree. I have the actual temperature to the nearest tenth of 18.9, and then 0 for the dew point. Then we have a few other bits of information here as well. So that's Philadelphia. If I look at Lancaster here, something similar. Winds were 110 at 19, gusting to 29, 10 miles visibility. Clear, probably because of all the wind. Temperature 21, dew point 02. Altimeter setting 30.21 inches of mercury. Remarks, peak wind 110 at 29 knots. And here's the time that was observed. Level pressure, or accurate temperature and dew point. So we have it. Now, I'm going to skip down here to Hazleton. And why am I going to do that? Hazleton doesn't have a tower. So you'll notice it says Hazleton, here's the time, and then it says auto. Auto means that no human was involved in the making of this METAR. And the winds were 110 at 11, gusting to 17. And we have some variability from 80 to 140 degrees. Visibility 10 statute miles. By the way, 10 statute miles means at least 10. They don't measure more than that. Clear, temperature 17, dew point -3. Altimeter was 30.26 inches of mercury. Once again, they have nice precipitation discrimination equipment. And that's it. That's all they have. All right. AVP, you can see their forecast. Notice again, I'm sorry, not forecast, METAR, not include the word auto. Same thing for IPT, Williamsport. Mount Pocono is automated. The winds there are at 11, gusting to 19, varying from 50 to 110 degrees, etc., etc. Same thing for Selinsgrove. Once again, an automatic report. One thing I did want to point out when it comes to flying instruments, if you go into a large airport in particular, or a towered field in general, when the visibility is low, you might have something called RVR that's reported, runway visual range. Now, you'd still see that report if you look at the METAR, even if you were a VFR only guy, because, well, it's in the METAR. Before, you probably just ignored it because you only see that when the weather is pretty bad and they're telling you that. So RVRs will tell you visibility on a particular runway. Some of the instrument approaches that we'll look at here eventually will say, oh, guess what? If you're coming in on this runway, you need at least this visibility or this RVR. Sometimes you have to convert actually between those, but that's somewhat rare. Okay, so that's kind of a quick review of the METARs. Of course, how do we get those? We have AWOS systems, and there are 4 levels. AWOS. AWOS A just gives you an altimeter setting. AWOS 1 gives you that plus wind, temperature, and dew point, and possibly density altitude. Then we have AWOS 2 that has that plus visibility. And then finally, AWOS 3 give you all of that plus clouds and ceiling information. Of course, we have ASOS. ASOS does all of that plus much more. That's where you have things like the precipitation discrimination, etc., etc. And that's all of the A02s in the remarks that we see here. All right. And then from there, he talks about TAFs. Again, this is all review. So if I go to Philadelphia, I'll see from when this thing started. So it was valid from the 19th at 1800 hours Zulu till the 20th at 2400 Zulu. And the winds were originally supposed to be 18 gusting 30. And then from 2200, calling for winds at 16 gusting 25. And then they're supposed to go down a little bit more as the day goes on. Here, when you look at the forecasts, they're never going to forecast more than 6 miles of visibility. So P6SM just means plus 6 statute miles visibility is what they're forecasting. So that is a TAF. Some other forecasts that you might see. Your book will talk about area forecast. Area forecasts have gone away. They have been replaced with a forecasting tool. Look at the EFA tool. Forecast for aviation has essentially completely replaced, well, except for Alaska. Alaska, they still have these. The area forecasts, the FAs that they used to be called. So now we have the GFA tool instead. Rod, I don't believe in this book he even mentions it. I think in his latest private pilot book he does talk a little bit about this tool. But this is something I would encourage you, if you feel inclined, just go to this website and play with it a little bit. They have some tutorials on this website as well on how to use this. Look at different things here. I can say I would like to look at clouds, ceilings, visibility, any thunderstorms forecast. What about the winds? And the winds at different altitudes. A nice graphical depiction of that as well. I can still get my wind forecast, my winds aloft. If I go back to forecast and I go to winds and temps, fault, they're going to show me the fancy graphical forecast, and I can go to the different altitudes as I wish. I can scroll down a little bit and just click on this quadrant, and it's going to bring up the winds aloft for various altitudes along my route. Now, this is another one of those places where software is awesome. If you have a flight planner like WingX or ForeFlight, and you say, I'm going from here to here, it will actually suggest different altitudes for you. You can say, I'm going VFR or IFR, and it will say, all right, fine. So here's an altitude, and here's how long it'll take. And here's a different altitude and how long it will take. Instrument pilot, I look at this row here for Wilkes-Barre, 3,000 feet. The winds are going to be, they're going to be out of 100 at 20 knots. And then at 6,000, they're going to go from 100 at 26 knots. Notice that I have temperatures then, +3 Celsius at 6,000 feet. And why is there no temperature for 3,000 feet? Because I'm too close to the ground. PSB eliminates that entirely. It doesn't say, hey, this is what your winds or temperatures are that low to the ground. Do I care about the temperature? Well, maybe I care about things like freezing. There are other charts that'll show you freezing levels, but something to keep in mind when you're looking at the winds and temperature aloft. So for IFR planning especially, I think that this is a little bit better way to see what's going on. And, if you're going on a longer trip, maybe to determine what altitude would be most appropriate, at least for the winds, and then maybe looking at temperatures and such as well. Right. Software is a beautiful thing. Rod does talk a little bit about some of those old school black and white charts, and I don't think they even test you on those anymore, honestly. It's just, upgraded their technology, and they're using the nice, pretty graphical charts. Back to observations, he talks a little bit about radar. Look at radar for the whole country, and then I can actually also click in to various single sites, regional radar as well. So if I check on OCX here, radar, I can tell it I want to loop it. I can choose the kind of radar I want, base reflectivity, composite. Normally, composite is what I'm looking for. Different ways of looking at what's out there. And of course, This brown stuff is probably just ground clutter. I can use my cursors to move to other radar sites, and likely I won't see any of that. This is real stuff out here. West. It shows me my different intensities as well. And if there's any warnings, they will superimpose those on top with these little boxes. So tornado warnings, severe thunderstorms, flash flood, and marine warnings. They will tell me about all of those as well. Cool. Radar in the cockpit. Again, yes, you can if you have serious, weather subscription, or if you have ESB in on the appropriate frequency, you can do FISB. Things to be aware of, though, that is not real time. It might be delayed 5 minutes. It might be delayed a half hour. So the advantage of that radar, if you will, that's not really radar, is that you can see weather farther away, but it's not real time. So having your own radar in your aircraft is in some ways better. Having things like a strike finder is also a little bit better if you're trying to avoid things like thunderstorms. Pluses and minuses to everything, though. So your radar is not going to have the same distance. Also, when it comes to things like a strike finder, where you're getting the lightning isn't necessarily where the storm is the worst. Same thing is true with precipitation, which is what your radar is going to show you. So nothing perfect, but having a lot of information is not a bad thing. Okay, some other things we have. Prog charts. Those good old 4-panel charts. Now, you'll notice low level surface to 24,000 feet is here. If you really want it in black and white, they'll let you see it in black and white. Normally present this 4-panel chart anymore. So if I click on this, for example, to show me, and I can look at the times, from 00 Zulu, 12-hour chart, and then I have my 24-hour chart. This one's valid from 12 Zulu. Give me the key. I'm going to have some instrument conditions. Here's where I'm going to have marginal VFR, and I'm going to have turbulence. What's my freezing level? The freezing level at the surface is a little bit small. I can enlarge the map. There you go. Now we can see it a lot better. And this is pretty common, right? You got instrument conditions and then marginal VFR kind of surrounding those instrument conditions. Have some turbulence, not too surprising with all the winds today. And what's the turbulence like? Well, it's telling you turbulence is and how much turbulence you can have based on the little symbols that are here. Then here we have a freezing level, 12,000 feet. Same thing over here. Here I see a freezing level at 8,000 feet. I go ahead and reduce my map. If I go back, surface plot. Look, what's my valid time? What's going on right now? And it's showing me there's a trough up here. Remember, a trough is a linear, if you will, low pressure area. We've got low pressure here, a high up here in Canada. We have a couple of fronts. Stationary front here, over here, and then we have a biting cold front here. Now, of course, they have colors, so it's easier to know what's a cold front. If you're looking at a black and white chart, you would know that the pointy ones, that's the cold front. It's the biting cold. That's the way to remember it. There are other ways to remember it. I won't go into those. Some of my students a while back told me some alternative ways to remember that, but they're not exactly PG-13, so I'm not gonna go there. Now you might say, okay, when I look at the traditional four section chart, I have a second surface view. Well, in this chart, you'll notice I can just step through time. Step through time. Now I have a different valid time here. And what is it telling me? There's likely going to be some rain here. There's a chance of rain there. Again, I can look at the key down at the bottom. And these are awesome tools, right? We didn't used to have all these. So that's pretty cool. Other forecast charts. Convection, like convective outlook chart. Tell me about things like, oh, are there any convective sigmets or not? Convective outlook. It's going to tell me what I should expect in terms of convection. Rod talks a little bit about a high-level prognostic chart. Above 24,000 feet, you're going to be up there, so I'm not really even going to talk about that. We have our different advisories. We have sigmets and airmets. Met is a much lower threshold. Here we're going to see that there are airmets that are covering the lower part of Pennsylvania at the moment. And I can turn these on and off, by the way. I can just click on these and say, I am so confused. So what do I have left? Okay, now I just have turbulence. All right, so that's low-level turbulence, level wind shear, surface winds that are high, icing. Instrument conditions are forecast over here in Illinois and Ohio. Mountain obscuration down here. I can look at sigmets, and I can see different kinds of sigmets. All plot. Once again, I can look at a small area like here. There's no sigmets at the moment. And if I look out at the whole country, I'll see a few down south. We have PIREPs. They're hiding under aircraft reports. Click on this. I can see this was a CRJ that reported at this time at, looks like 12,000 feet, 100 feet, excuse me, experienced some low-level wind shear. It has a little bit more information about that. Just a few tools that are out there that you can use. There's quite a bit, as you can see, that you can use in order to investigate weather as you're trying to plan for your instrument flight and as you're making your instrument flight. So I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you guys in our next video.